What up, my man? What up?
What's going on, Gary? It is almost the end of August. We're almost in September. Can you believe it?
No, dude, I can't. That's 6 months gone.
Yeah.
Less than 6 months to the end of the year, 4 months to Trump's elected or shot. Hate to be so negative, but sorry, that's the way it's going to be. Yeah, dude, 28th of August. My daughter's starting senior high school now. And
Wow.
like I just thought I had her just the other day. Like it's really wild. This year has rolled by so fast, man. I mean, it just seems like every quarter I need to make a tax payment to the IRS, which really pisses me off.
Have you stayed busier this year than previous years, or is it just, what do you think's made it go by so quick?
Well, I think that people that get older, I'll tell you that time starts flying by. At least that's true for me. It just seems like it's just moving so rapidly. I don't know, man. Maybe we're just having too much fun.
I feel like we stay busy, but then I feel like the news cycle is insane. I feel like every week there's something where we're just like, oh, whoa, like that changes everything. It's just never ending. I mean, I don't know if it's because it's a presidential election year, right? I don't know if it's all the conferences we've been to, all the traveling. And what's scary is when normally for me, when October hits, it's like, okay, that's the end of the year. Because Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holidays just, for me, make it move by very quick.
Yeah, and they ruin a lot of productivity. I think all those holidays are too long myself. They drive me crazy. I don't think anybody enjoys them too. They're just too long, man. 10 days is good for me. 3 weeks is not so good. I know the Europeans like it, but for me, it's just too much. Hey, looks like our Mr. Weisberger showed up. It's going to give you a free hour to go do something else, man. Go get a haircut or something.
Oh, do I need a haircut?
No, I'm just kidding. I've been looking forward to sitting down with Dave for some time. I've been trying to do this.
You know what? I'm going to close this and use Chrome. I'm gonna log out and log back in. I'm Brave, and I don't think it's working. So
you sound beautiful and you sound great. You look great. So, but yeah, feel free, man.
Real quick, I just thought it was a really good point. I love how you conceptualize everything around Bitcoin. So we were just talking about some maintenance costs around your house. And so that's just another reason why not to own a home, right? Is people don't think about, like when you actually bought this home, did you actually think, okay, how much am I going to have to spend to maintain the yard?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, dude. Absolutely. Dave, we're just talking about, is this a better connection, Dave?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Before I saw your mouth moving, but I couldn't hear a word.
So Sam and I work for my property now that the government forced me out of the schools and forced me out of my 27,000 square foot office building. I relocated down in St. Pete and built a office house residence that can basically support my family, support education, support a business. Since I never know when they're going to pull the next monkey virus out of their playbook, but we have for the next 3 days.
I always find it funny. There isn't a lot of room past me on the libertarian scale, but I always find it amusing when I meet people that are actually potentially past me, because I'm pretty fired up the last few days about crap that's going on. But
we're gonna have fun, dude. We will have fun in this little event. But I have twice a year, I have about 10 or 15 guys come in the yard and they clean the trees and clean everything. And Sam's like, bro, how much is that? There's 15 people in your yard and it's going to go on for 3 days. I'm like, this is why people shouldn't own a home. Because he's like, hey, why do you have to take care of the trees? I'm like, there's $1 million worth of trees in this yard, dude. Like, if you don't
I was at a lower level, but we were, before we moved into Manhattan in 2007, we were in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And I know how much it costs to remove a very old tree that was about to fall over and hit our house. And it's in the thousands. It's a very serious thing. But yeah, we moved to an apartment in Manhattan and then got the hell out as the pandemic was starting. We have a beach house on Long Beach Island. That's actually where I am now. But I live in Miami in a condo, so it's a hell of a lot lower up.
Yeah, you just pay the HOA fees and go down the road.
Yeah, it's annoying, but the truth is I get to look at the bay and look at the beach, and and it's easy.
Yeah.
And about half my net is half what I was paying in New York for something similar. So there you go.
Well, Dave, we're really appreciative of you to be able to come on the show. I'm going to drop down, so it'll just be you and Gary, but I'm looking forward to this. I'm still going to be watching. So thanks for
Okay.
taking the time, really.
Yeah, no problem. And Gary, just so you know, I am the chairman of the board and a co-founder of CoinRoutes. Just between you, me, and the wall, I am.
Hey, Dave, we're live right now.
Oh, okay,
So
cool,
just to let you know that.
cool.
I,
I
di- I
didn't.
did. Well, I didn't want you to keep going on if you
No, I
didn't
just
know
want to
where
make
we
sure
were.
in terms of you want to know how to refer to me or what was going on. But
Oh
yes.
yeah. Oh, okay. I'm gonna introduce you, and then if I leave anything out, like please let me know.
Okay, cool.
Sam, thanks so much, guys. I'm very excited about this. I've never physically met Dave. I've been trying to. Been watching him for about a year and a half. He is the co-founder and chairman of CoinRoutes, and he's going to tell us what that is. He's down in Miami. He I'll say it this way. He is deeply in the crypto market, developing software and data products for strategic advice on regulatory issues and market structures around the crypto industry. And he's working to connect traditional financial markets with the evolving evolution, the evolving crypto markets. He's been in the market for 30 years in TradFi, worked for people like Morgan Stanley, Solomon Brothers. And one of the things I'm really interested in discussing is VWAP, his program, his algorithm trading platform that we're going to talk a little bit about today. And we're going to talk a lot about macro and Bitcoin and the role it plays. David, really, really good to have you here. If I left anything out, please, do the bragging rights that I left out on you, man.
I mean, I've been around so long. I mean, I don't feel old. I'm in the gym every day. It's all good. But, the truth is that, I've had 2 careers, and I don't know which is longer in the sense. I mean, in crypto, we say it's like dog's years. So I've been in crypto now since, for over 7 years. So that's like 49 years in human years. And before that, it was 35 years, starting with Morgan Stanley, moving to Solomon Brothers. It became Citi. I left in 2008 with a lot of other people, went to Two Sigma, where I started their Two Sigma securities market maker, and then had a brief trip into a company that got bought by IHS Market, and then ended up founding CoinRoutes with Ian Weisberger, who's the current CEO, and it was his idea. Actually, he brought me into the company. But it all kind of fits together because I started my career in program trading and technology, if you could believe that. And so I've always been on the edge of automation in financial markets, certainly in program trading, moving to automated market making and building algorithms. And if I got a front row seat to what happened, I mean, in 1990, 100% of all equity trades were done by a human being talking to another human being. Of that, it was probably around 20% was capital committed upstairs, meaning, on the trading desks of Wall Street, and about 80% on the floor of the exchange. And yes, some specialists sometimes committed capital, but really it was just matching trades. Well, that more or less stayed the same up until the 90s in NASDAQ, where there was all the whole change. It started with a settlement in 96. There was Reg ATS, which created alternative trading systems. I won't bore you with all that, but it's interesting because I've gotten to see it. And we watched, and at the same time in Europe, it was happening too. Systems that were all electronic were taking over trading. In fact, the New York Stock Exchange was the last domino to fall. And that happened mostly because of a regulation called Reg NMS, which basically got rid of their monopoly. It said you had to honor quotes that weren't in your own exchange, and that made it impossible for people trading on their own, humans, to ignore the electronic exchanges that were trying to compete with them. And so the world went electronic. Well, when the world went electronic, a lot of things happened. Probably the most important thing to happen is the vast majority of the trades that were done by humans that did not require capital, i.e., they didn't say bid wanted for a block of stock, but like what we think of in the world of crypto as OTC, that has more or less fluctuated around 20% of trading. But that 80% that was by humans, the vast majority of that went towards what we call algorithms. Now, people always confuse algorithms with trading bots. A trading bot that you maybe give it money and it decides what to buy Bitcoin now, sell it later, whatever. That's not what an algorithm is. An algorithm says, I have an order. I'm going to give you these parameters, buy it. So a client may call or talk to or just enter in a system an order. And this is for equities. This is for futures. This is for FX now. They enter an order in a system. They say, I want to buy, we'll stick with crypto because it's easy. I want to buy Bitcoin. I want to buy 20 Bitcoin. I want you to do it as soon as practicable. I want you to buy 20 Bitcoin stretched out over the next hour based on a time-weighted basis. I want to buy 20 Bitcoin, and I want you to participate being 1% or 0.1% of the market over however long it takes, or any variation of that. And so what a computer system does, or an algorithm does, is it takes the order and it breaks it into little pieces. And it decides the size to put out each piece out, and the price to put each piece out. And at CoinRoutes, we care about this a lot because essentially the most important problem with this move from people who you may trust to a machine is now all of a sudden everyone in the world can look at what the machine is doing and saying, is there a big buyer out there? Now, 20 Bitcoin wouldn't do it, but if you said I was buying 2,000 Bitcoin over 6 hours, that's a fairly large order. I mean, it could be done, but the machine, if it does things like does 10 Bitcoin every minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, and it was obvious or repetitive, people would start jumping in front of you. And so when you build algos, you have to design them so as to be random and so as to trade when it's better opportunistically to trade, i.e. when the market is coming in your direction, you might want to post, if the market is moving against you, you might want to take liquidity, etc. So CoinRoutes, we do all of these things and effectively achieve prices that are pretty good. Just the headline, and it's on our website. I did the study not too long ago in the first half of this year on many billions of dollars of trading. Our clients trading spot crypto traded for lower aggregate cost, net of everything, than the Bloomberg estimates equity traders trade at institutional size. So in other words, crypto may be a newer market, but with good tools, it is starting to behave, as you said at the beginning, as a more mature market. And so that's the sort of stuff that we do. I personally care a great deal about trying to embrace this technology and help our markets get better. The tagline, Gary, it's a simple one. I know you're not a fan of the government, but and neither am I, because they've.
Well, where would you get that idea from?
Yeah, it's sort of. I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan. We're rewatching it at night because it's funny. George Costanza's famous episode, "Do the Opposite." They tend to do a lot of that. But what's fascinating is we know and we take for granted in the U.S. and some do, some don't, but most do, that the United States has benefited enormously by having the most efficient analog capital markets on the planet. And that's just a simple fact. We have half the world's investable wealth here, even if it's not half owned by Americans. Our capital markets are more efficient, and it is the most efficient analog market. The trouble is, at some point in the future, 15, 20 years, could be 5 years because the technology is already good enough, but it'll probably be longer. All the world's capital markets will be digital, and digital is dramatically more efficient than analog. And so having the best analog capital markets when the rest of the world is going digital is going to cause us to lose our advantage. And that losing that advantage is trillions in GDP. And so I personally, from a legacy point of view, care a great deal about improving our regulatory environment for what we now call crypto, but I like to think of it in terms of the digitization of finance, in order to embrace the technology and do what we typically do, and what we did in the internet. What we did in the Internet of Information was we allowed our companies to dominate the world. I mean, our companies dominated the world not because the government said, hey, go dominate the world. Dominated the world because we had the confluence of investable capital, human capital, and a lack of government control, which allowed our companies to innovate. And we need to do the same thing with regard to the digitization of finance, or we run the risk of literally losing that edge. That to me is the biggest single impact and the thing I care about the most. And we have an election coming up that, quite frankly, I was hoping a month ago wasn't quite so stark. It's becoming more and more stark by the day. I mean, today, for example, the Biden-Harris administration just cracked down on NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is asinine. I can't think of a better word for it, and clear proof that they're still going after the all digital markets to try to put them in a straitjacket. And putting markets in a straitjacket is not a really good way to get innovation. And so, we are facing choices. Hopefully, either that particular side loses and the Trump Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard kind of unity party idea, actually does something and wins, or the Harris administration gains somehow a brain transplant and takes Elizabeth Warren out of the corridors of power when it comes to finance. But either way, at some point, we're going to need modernized regulations that work with all this stuff. Okay, I talked a lot, so I'm sure you have a lot to interject.
Well, listen, I think your point on the innovation issue with the analog, America had a 200 million population laboratory experiment to basically bring all the citizens in America into a test bed. This is how all technology gets built, right? You have one or two clients that are willing to be the test case, whether they know it or not. And then you build on big data sets. You build, this is what we're doing at Node 40. You're doing it at CoinRoutes. And I actually want to talk about that because I think that one of the things that you're doing with the algorithm is that, and this is just my suspicion, but one, I really love what you're doing because you're not only investing in Bitcoin and other digital assets, but you see this, you see this as us digitizing planet Earth. And I see that's it. Like, I don't need this to be about Bitcoin. If you just understand, I think being older is actually hugely beneficial if you're not stuck in the past and you can really look at, everything changes. But I just tried to use the analogy yesterday. Imagine if I'm in Los Angeles and I have the Flintstone Supercar made of big stone wheels, 800 tons, and I launch it on the LA roadway, right? I'm not going to be allowed there very long. Okay. I have become a massive problem. And this is my example of legacy. I don't mean to embarrass legacy. I'm not embarrassing the stone wheel. I'm just saying the stone wheel has no place in a modern era. And an Excel spreadsheet is not going to deal with quadrillions of transactions. Micro transactions, exactly what you're doing on VWAP, dude, it's going to happen in every market, right?
Well,
it
happened in the equity world. What's funny about it is people don't understand why things are. Like, this year was historic, and the SEC did one good thing, but it's good with an asterisk. So the good thing they did is they moved from T+2 to 2+1 settlement. And that sounds uber geeky, but it mattered because what it meant is if you buy a stock, you didn't actually get. Well,
Dave, just real quick for the audience, I'm really sensitive to over talking people. Talk about what T1 is, please.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to say, so T is trade date. T+1 means that now when institutions buy or sell stock, that transaction settles the next day. It was up until May of this year, I think it was. It settled in 2 days. Now, in crypto, in digital, it could settle immediately upon demand, depending on how you do it. And so we have these things called trading days, the trading session, for U.S. equities. Well, every market has an open and a close, right? And is closed outside of that. And all settlement is based off of the trades that got done to the close. What's interesting is people don't realize how expensive it was. It was a lot of money to change it. Now, why? Well, that's because when you, Gary, buy a share of IBM, you don't own IBM. You have an account at, let's just say, Schwab. And Schwab has a ledger in their firm that says, okay, you, Gary, I know that that you own IBM. That's how I understand it. But in reality, you don't own it. In reality, Schwab doesn't own it. In reality, those stock certificates are in a vault under 55 Water Street in New York at a company called DTCC. And they have a ledger which says Schwab has X amount of IBM. And Schwab has a ledger that says within this, Gary has this amount of IBM. Now, obviously, that's a really kind of weird system. It works. I mean, it was put in this way. It's called street name. It was done because with paper certificates, they were having enormous problems. They used to have to shut the stock market down for a day because volumes were going so high. They couldn't handle all that. So they changed it to this process. So now we have 3 interlocking ledgers in order to determine who owns what. So there have been some famous cases. I won't go into them. You can research them, where there have been proxy wars, where there's been corporate takeovers, etc. And the question of who owns the shit, what's the cap table look like for publicly traded stocks? And there are many situations where it's not perfect. Well, why isn't it perfect? I just explained why it's not perfect, because all that has to happen is one of the 3 ledgers gets messed up. With digital finance, everybody's ownership is directed to a wallet, and the entire world, if it's Bitcoin, can understand who owns what. And yes, exchanges like Coinbase may own a ton of Bitcoin and have their own ledger for who owns it, and that's fine. Those people could always request delivery of that either to their own wallet or to a dedicated custodial wallet in order to keep the system secure. But you can immediately understand how that technology is revolutionary. And so it's kind of a big deal. But the fact is we've really squeezed the lemon to get all the juice out of how to be the most efficient within this analog world where paper stock certificates are there. And so that's one of the reasons I understand it. And when it comes to actually the trading, whether it's VWAP, or which stands for volume weighted average price, by the way, or TWAP, time weighted average price, or PWP, price weighted participation, or just opportunistic algorithms, the entire goal of trading cheaper is something that every institution has embraced in every traditional asset class, with the exception of real estate, because that's not really subdividable. But bringing that to crypto was, yes, that we were one of the first and we're one of the biggest. But the fact is it's ultimately the way that almost all assets will trade, because it makes sense, right? You need to. I like to look at it as if anyone has ever driven a manual gear shift, you're trying to mesh the gear, with the clutch, as you're going forward. I actually was always good with the clutch. It's kind of funny. People today, you don't have a whole lot of those. It's meshing your order into the marketplace to cause the minimum amount of friction. That's what it's about.
That's a really good analogy. What drove you, Dave, to, well, I have so many questions, but what drove you to build this firm, and like, who is your client?
What drove me was simple.
Pardon?
What drove is simple. Ian Weisberger, who's CoinRoutes CEO, and is running the company now completely. I am trying to extricate myself from the day to day. Have more or less done so. Ian had the idea. He said, "Look, there's this market." He had been working doing transaction analytics on Wall Street. It was his first Wall Street job. Before that, he had done a bunch of Silicon Valley things and has been programming for a very long time. And so he saw this and said, this is a really crazy market. It really, being able to help people navigate it would be a big deal. And we started looking at the data, and my eyes almost went bong. It was like, wow, this is really, really interesting. And it happened to be at a time that I had just left market. And so I had a nice little exit package. I was doing some consulting work, trying to decide, do I want to go back to a big Wall Street firm or not? And he had this idea, and it was like, this was a great idea. So I'm not taking any credit for it, because it wasn't. But what we did do is, on a blank sheet of paper, we figured out how this market is different than other markets and built accordingly. And that matters. And that's too detailed and fine grained for this conversation, I think. But the short answer is, in crypto, I'll give you a couple of interesting things. So in equities, if you're looking at a market, you might be, and you're looking at a Bloomberg screen or whatever screen, you might care about a couple of price levels other than what's displayed, maybe, right? You generally look at the bid and the offer, and it's generally pretty thick. And then you can look a little bit beyond it. In crypto, because tick sizes are not regulated, in Bitcoin, you might actually care about as many as 2,000 price levels. that might be meaningful. Within 1% of the price, there could be 5,000 price levels in terms of different orders on different exchanges at different prices. Second thing that's massively different, fees. In the world of equities, fees are regulated and capped at well, more or less 30% of the tick size. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. It doesn't matter. There's new rules, whatever. But I won't go into deep equity market structure. That used to be my life, so I understand it. In crypto, there's no caps and no regulations. So every exchange has different fees for different people. And so if you don't have your system, understand fees, understand that you need to have an enormous amount more data, understand where liquidity is, in a sense, being able to look down the book and those fees, you're not going to be very successful at trading because you're not going to have a good picture. And so that was important. And we saw all that and we built our systems understanding that from the beginning.
Who is your ideal client?
Our biggest clients now, frankly, and this is actually an interesting thing where regulations could help us. Our clients almost exclusively are, with one major exception, which is one of our first investors, almost exclusively are firms that trade for their own account, whether that is hedging, transactions that they've made for other clients or trading proprietarily. Why, you might ask? Well, because we're in the US, because the government has said we can't be an introducing broker dealer, because they have basically blocked anyone from being a crypto broker unless they are a money transmitter, and generally getting Wells notices to not do it. There's just no legal way for a small company to do it, and I didn't want to take that risk, given that I know a lot of the people at the SEC. So we have to charge a fee. So as a result, if you're trading for your own account and we save you, let's just pick numbers. Let's say we save you 8 basis points on trading, maybe 4 basis points if you're really higher frequency, and we charge 1. Well, okay, that's a good trade. I'm happy for that, right? So if generally we provide more performance than our, better trading for our customers, then we charge. That's a good business model, right? Now look at other types of customers, agent customers, a customer who if we help their customer get a better price and we charge them a fee, now they're subsidizing their customer's performance and the customer might not appreciate it. And so what ended up happening is most agent clients are harder for us to convince because they don't care as much about this silly little thing called best execution, because there's no requirements to measure it and clients don't really even understand it. I mean, if you look today in crypto, because the markets, like, I don't have it running right now, but I did. If you look at Bitcoin at any point in time, the bid is going to look higher than the offer. Now, you can't necessarily make money about that because the fees equalize it out. It's also across different exchanges. So clients don't really know where the best price is at any point in time. We obviously do. And so to explain to them that we're getting them best price is a much harder sale. So we care. Our best clients are principal trading firms as a result, or proprietary trading firms. We do have clients who earn performance-based fees because we save them enough that it's worth it. Our first investor was a company called Bitcoin Swiss, who trades both. They do agent trading and principal trading. And in their particular case, they saw us as an important marketing benefit because they market the fact that they get better prices. But a lot of firms don't do that. And so that's why our customers are who they are.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. A guy buying 10, 20, 50 Bitcoin a year, is this program too sophisticated for that guy?
Buying $10, $20 cost averaging in, yeah, it's not too sophisticated for the firm they're using, because that firm is probably presumably doing it for hundreds or thousands of clients. Our clients tend to be more traders than long-term investors, though. That is true. So you buy, you sell, you buy, you sell. That's
high frequency players.
Not so much. Mid-frequency swing trader. I mean, high frequency is weird because I used to run a high frequency, firm, 2 Sigma Securities. I was, the executive principal there, and there you might be trading seconds in and out. Our clients are ones who trade over minutes or hours. Not buy it and hold it for 6 months though.
So much so because I really agree with you. I mean, you must be thinking that this becomes a very, very significant issue to the industry over time. Right now, people don't seem to be worried about the shrinkage that happens, see, this is what you and I know that other people don't know. Hey, all markets in the beginning are very inefficient until they're not.
That's
And
right.
then people like you and me start going, hey, that's just too much, dude. 20
That's right.
bips on 100 basis points is a big spread, right? Let's go
Yeah,
squeeze that out of
it's
that.
crazy. I mean, look, I have the benefit of having seen this multiple times in my past. My favorite example is what happened with index arbitrage in the United States. So I built the first program trading system for Morgan Stanley back in the 80s. So yes, old. That's where the gray is coming from. The simple fact is, at that time, we were literally printing money by having our desk. The traders would see the trade, be able to get a futures trade done in Chicago on the S&P futures at a price, and literally call their floor brokers to say, run out, I need to buy a basket. So what was our first system that we did? This is no lie. We had pre-printed groups of tickets. And so it would be program A, B, C, D. We'd have a program number. And the floor broker, there were 50 of them. They would basically take the pre-printed packet of tickets. And when they got the futures trade done, they would grab the packet of tickets. They'd all run to all the posts. This was literally how it happened. Get their trades, write it down on the ticket, run back to the Morgan Stanley post, have our operator in our system type in all of those fills, and we could find out what the cost of buying an S&P or whatever, whichever index basket it was, within 5 minutes, and be able to say, look, we only had 5 minutes of risk from the futures contract to the S&P. This is true, and it was very profitable. Well, of course, what happened? DOT happened, designated order turnaround, the system that allowed you to automate trading happened, and we were there too. And now you could get that 5 minutes down to 30 seconds, and then to 10 seconds, and then to 1 second, and to sub-second, and here you are. And all along the time, at every single interval, as these things kept getting tighter and tighter, the spreads kept getting narrower and narrower, to the point where you couldn't make money on pure index arb anymore. Now you had to trade more sophisticated. And so a company, well, I won't go through naming names of the history, but there are companies that did a good job. And they came up with smarter ways of buying or selling to give them an edge, to get a little bit cheaper on the stock leg or a little bit higher on the futures leg, depending on which way they were doing it when they were trading these things. And so it became impossible just to do it pure. And then it became a big financing trade, where people would have markets for exchange for physical, for those who understand futures markets, to be able to trade that. And a whole interdealer broker community grew, which is, Cantor Fitzgerald, Tullett, and Prebon, was Tullett in Tokyo back in those days, started doing all that. So all these markets became commoditized. And that's the history of markets. I could give multiple other examples of watching it go from this unbelievable Wild West down to it's a commodity. And it takes a lot of time for that to happen. Crypto is still kind of in the early stages of that, despite it being electronic.
Oh, I would say it's very early stage. I mean, if this was a 9-inning game, where do you put crypto, or as you call it, digitization?
Second or third inning. I mean, look, we started in 2017. There were $2,000 spreads, and between exchanges, it was absolutely insane. In 2018, 2019, you'd have multiple occasions over the year where you'd have double-digit number of minute, hundreds of dollar spreads. These days, you could get $20, $30, $40 spreads, maybe $50 spreads that last for seconds. Eventually, those spreads will not really exist anymore. But there's still the fact of the matter is it's still tradable, still volatile for sure. But the actual true arbs are getting much harder. So it is definitely maturing, and that's good, because there's it's a good thing when when markets mature. That means that these Bitcoin ETFs that out there, one of the reasons they're able to be so cheap to trade is because the arbitrages are mostly, I won't say gone, but they're small enough that it doesn't matter to the average retail trader.
Let's talk about maturing a little bit, because if you think that the digital world, I don't think it's anywhere near the third inning, but let's just pretend like it is. As the Cantor Fitzgeralds of the world, which most people that are listening to this have probably never heard of Cantor Fitzgerald. But when Howard, before 9/11, 2001, Howard moved into the energy market. That I was working at Dynegy at the time, and we built a $30 billion company, man, on the back of nothing, right? I mean, it was amazing. We're like, wow, how did we luck into this? It was just the right time, right place. Massive arbitrage and no transparency. Moving from legacy to a fully traded market on the half hour, like ExxonMobil didn't want that. I was talking to Steve the other day, my mentor, who's the COB of chairman of the board of Williams, and they just bought a $25 million business from someone that it never made money. First year, he makes $250 million. It's just thought process and culture. Well, I think it's the way people look, right? And the more people like you, where I'm leading to, there's a lot of guys, maybe not a lot of guys like you and I, but there's a lot more coming, right? And we might have just been a tad early here. When I see Howard Lutnick in a meeting and he says, I have $2 billion worth of lending protocols, I'm like, Kenner put nat gas and electricity. He really put it on steroids. What we were doing physically, he really took to the paper markets. I think we're in a very immature stage right this second, because like the city banks of the world have to come out, and they're not even out of the closet yet. You and I know they're here.
Let me explain my point. Why do I say second or third inning? It's really kind of an interesting one. There's two different pieces to the puzzle. There's the technology and what's going on inside the digital market, where I think we are absolutely in the second or third inning. There is the positioning of the technology of where it will be and how it can be used in the greater market. And keep in mind, crypto is a $2 trillion market, which is a blip. It's a fraction, tiny little fraction of global financial market. So it's nothing. There, we're probably not even in the on-deck circle in the first batter in the first inning. And I'll explain why. So, the SEC, and everyone knows that I'm not a big fan of what the SEC has been doing with regulation by enforcement. I mean, look, there are good people down in that building who I think are as frustrated as I am. But they've effectively, what people don't talk about is they effectively have blocked every broker-dealer on the planet from trading crypto. And they've done it in a way that is extra legal, meaning that they haven't passed a law that says you can't do it. But FINRA, which is the self-regulatory agency that's responsible for all the stock brokers, has a process where you go through, where you actually apply when you want to start a new business. It's called a CMA, Change Management Authorization, I think is what it stands for, but I could be wrong on what it stands for. And they have to approve it. And one of the things you can trade if you're a broker-dealer are non-securities. So almost every broker-dealer has an energy trading business, right? Or a commodity trading business for, mostly for precious metals, but some even do agricultural commodities. Perfectly legal to do that. FINRA can give you that license. They can say you can do it. They have not approved one single broker-dealer to do that for digital commodities. Not one. Now, why? Well, it's not because FINRA doesn't want to. I literally talked in 2018 with Robert Cook, who was running FINRA, and I was friendly with his predecessor. So, I knew Robert, and he's a good man. And I asked him why, and he wouldn't answer me. And he said, and I know why, because I've talked to people since then. It's because, and this predates Gary Gensler, so this is not just on him. Jay Clayton had the same policy. The SEC told them, don't approve it. We don't want that to be done until we actually have regulations. And of course, here we are 7 years later, or 6 years later from that conversation, 7 years later in my entrance into the business, where there's still no regulations. So the FINRA doesn't allow people to trade digital commodities directly. If they did, then my firm might be, although we are profitable and we do have revenues, I don't know what we will be worth to a firm who wanted to take our technology and put it inside of a broker-dealer, but it will be a lot. I do know that much. And it's an interesting thought process, but the SEC has blocked that. Now, honestly, if Trump wins, that block will disappear almost immediately.
That's right.
If Harris actually pivots, although that seems after today, it seems almost impossible to believe that will happen, then that will disappear immediately. If somebody actually cares enough to go to the courts based upon the various cases that have happened, most notably Loper, Loper Bright versus Raimondo, which got rid of the Chevron doctrine. It's another rabbit hole we could go down. But if that happened, it would be gone as well. But it's still there. And so brokers in the United States can't trade Bitcoin. And why does that matter? And how do you know this is true? Well, it's true because I'm telling you, but it's also true because the SEC, when they approved the Bitcoin ETFs, forced the ETF issuers to do something they didn't want to do. ETF issuers like to be able to take, if it's a commodity or like gold, or if it's a stock, to be able to take the stocks in and issue the ETFs. They refuse. That's called in-kind delivery creation. They wanted them to do that. They wanted to do that. The SEC didn't allow them to. Well, why didn't they allow them to? Well, because the authorized participants, the people they generally depend upon, people like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, were not allowed to trade the underlying Bitcoin. So they made it go through something called cash creation, which is fine. It's not as efficient. It won't win in the end, but fine. But that's the reason. So, we have this extra legal thing, which is keeping value away. Now, you have to ask yourself a question, and this is an important question. If I'm an investor and I want to buy something, do I want to be able to buy it using my broker that I trust, that I have N number of years relationship with, that I know they're going to look out for me, even if it's in something new? Or do I want to use someone completely different? And so that's been one of the holdups and why we're not quite in the first inning yet for digital assets going mainstream. Now, I'm not saying Coinbase isn't an incredibly trustworthy company. I have an account with Coinbase. I'm not complaining about it. But the fact is, until the ETFs happened, I couldn't use my Schwab account or my E-Trade account to trade this stuff. And even there, I own a different thing. Bitcoin is different. I may want to have my own custody of Bitcoin, right? I might want to have something that I don't have to pay somebody to hold on to, that we can put someplace safe and it's there. I might want that. I may not, different strokes for different folks. But the fact is, there's no good way to do that in the current structure using your trusted intermediaries that you're used to using.
Yeah. See, and I think this offers an opportunity because the regulators and legacy players always slow play everything, right? They're delaying innovation because they don't want you to get too far ahead of them. I don't even know if they think that way, actually. I think it may just be.
Here's what I think's going on. Let me put it this way. This is going to make sense to you. I think that there are a lot of people in the buildings, in the SEC, CFTC, and other regulations who, on a very good faith, really do want to make a difference, really do want to make markets better. I really do believe that. I know people like that. Okay. I've been in that, as I said, I've been in the SEC building many times. I know a lot of people that work really hard. That said, by the time rules get written, lobbyists are extremely important in getting rules written. And, whether it's at the SEC or at the congressional level, and sometimes, like with this particular SEC, is hyper politicized. So there are politicians writing rules. And so you end up with this situation where a lot of rules get written specifically to advantage incumbent industries that might very well have political connections. And in other cases, you have rules that don't get written because the politicians don't want that industry to succeed. And there are industries that politicians like and ones that don't. Now, and there are some, like Elizabeth Warren, who created something, probably the dumbest thing she's ever done, and she probably would admit this, is she went public and let her staffers put out something, Elizabeth Warren is creating an anti-crypto army. So, saying the quiet part out loud. I think she'd have been much happier if it were quiet. But the fact that got public made her the personification of anti-crypto. But what is crypto? Crypto is economic freedom. It's the ability for you and I to make a transaction that's undetectable. Now, we know that governments don't like that, and that's fair. I mean, there are some very strong reasons why governments don't want 100% undetectable transactions. Drug dealers, arms dealers, human traffickers. These are people who we want the government to be able to stop them from transacting. So this is, money laundering that these people do. It's a serious problem. The good thing about crypto, and what is amazing to me, is that it's a terrible way for the bad guys to transact because it's all on a public blockchain. I have had multiple conversations over the last 5 years with people from the FBI, not because they're investigating me at conferences. So let's just get that straight. They can investigate away. I'm pretty boring, but basically the head of enforcement at both the New York office and I think it was the Maryland office, one of the sub offices around the FBI was dealing with digital assets. The exact quote both of them made was, "We love it when the bad guys use Bitcoin because they can see it." Yet it is often called that because of the nature of privacy. So you have to ask yourself the question, well, what's really going on here? If you're a politician that is really wants to be able to control everything, you don't want law-abiding citizens to be able to transact with each other. You don't. If you're a politician who only cares about stopping the bad guys, well, you're going to do something very different. And so we're sort of in this world, Gary, where, different things are wanted by different people. And it should be bipartisan, crypto, for a lot of reasons, because, as I said, it's a very inclusive financial system. It decreases the control the big banks have over a variety of processes. You mentioned financing, right? I mean, anyone who knows anything about the financing businesses, whether it's interest rate swaps, whether it's energy financing, whether it's repos, whether it's stock loan, those are controlled by a cartel of banks, where the prices are artificially expensive and the benefits and the ease of use are constrained. Well, distributed finance or decentralized finance in crypto, when that is able to operate on those sorts of instruments, will break that cartel and will be dramatically more efficient. There are people who don't want that. A lot of people don't want efficiency when it eats into their margins. And this is a historic thing. It goes for, I could give multiple examples, but I think you've seen plenty yourself.
Yeah. Back to maturity though. Bitcoin's 15 years old, right? It's a child. I remember in 2000, energy was just kind of like, we spent 20 years doing it, and when there was still tons of food, tons of fertile ground to plow. Then Enron collapsed and everything kind of got weird. What do you think? You said we were in the second or third inning. I was in Nashville. There was 6 or 7 guys from Citibank, 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, what are you guys doing here, dude? I never hear your name. Oh, we're only doing like $2 billion a month in financing. I'm like, oh shit, dude. And there are so many people here that do not want to be known they're here. Okay. They are not advertising.
I won't violate NDAs, but I've been forced to sign NDAs just to talk to people in certain industries, right? It's because, think of it this way. If you
agree though, for the audience, that there is a lot of major players that do not advertise they're here yet.
Oh, all of them. They're all there. They're all there. They're all doing something. I'll give you an example of why it is that they're so much on the QT. So when I built our first automated our first automated off-floor market making system in New York, for, at the time, was Solomon Smith Barney. I know it incensed Dick Grasso, who was running the New York Stock Exchange at the time, because he wanted all order flow to go down there. And I am a very stubborn individual and very outspoken. And so my boss calls me and says, Dave, I need you to make yourself scarce from 10 to 12. And in fact, call me before you want to come back, or I'll call you when you come back. Go see a movie. Literally, this happened on the trading floor at Solomon Smith Barney. And I'm running a desk at the time. I'm running a market making desk. So this is not a trivial thing. I just said, Bobby, what's going on? He goes, Dick Grasso's coming. And I know you. He knows you by name. He's going to look for you, and he wants to yell at you about why you're siphoning order flow away from the floor. And I know you. You're going to explain how you're doing better for customers. You're going to explain how he's a crook. You're going to explain all this other stuff. So I said, okay, fine. So anyway, I left. Now, the reason that I left is because I knew something and they said something. And that is, at that time, Dick Grasso was president of the New York Stock Exchange, a commercial enterprise, but he was also a regulator. And so the regulator in Dick could make because there's literally no way, and this is a dirty little secret that people don't understand. If people say, oh, look at this firm, they got fined for X, or they agreed to settle X. Let me tell you something. It is literally impossible for any financial firm to be 100% compliant. You will never find one, because there are rules that are just too prescriptive, that are written, and there are even rules that they sometimes get rid of, but they don't bother getting rid of them. They just stop enforcing them. And it's sort of known and understood. So if a regulator gets really mad at a firm, they can make their lives miserable. And they can do so in a way that is very, very costly. I mean, frankly, it's very not very well understood, but it's a big deal. So as a result, think of it. Now, today, the regulator has an avowed hatred for all things crypto. Any firms doing things in that space or being forward-looking there might get their ire. Do they want to take that risk? Of course not. They're going to keep it on the QT. They're not going to buy firms. They're going to get them into it, even though they can. Most of the firms we're talking about are multinational firms. They can do some things in their European office and have nothing to do with America, but they're still going to do it on the QT because the American regulators may still get mad. And this is unfortunately the way the world works. So until we have a regulatory environment which is not hostile, these firms are going to go, they're going to do business, they're going to do things they can do, but they're not going to make a big deal about it, and it's going to be on the QT. And that's why it's happening. That is why you're seeing what you're seeing.
This is really 3 years ago. I was in a deposition. My attorney was an ex-FTC lawyer. The night before, they do a little 3-hour preview. And the first thing out of her mouth was, "Do not mention Bitcoin." I'm like, huh? What? Now, I hired her specifically because she came out of the FTC and she was buddies with everybody. I think this was Alston Bird. And we literally did nothing wrong. I'm like, dude, I'm not like, it took me 3 years to get the FTC to tell me how much they wanted for this heinous crime. But when she looked at me and said, "Hey, you can't mention Bitcoin or blockchain," I'm like, really? Why? "Gary, don't be naive." I'm like, well, I'm not being naive. Okay. I think they're fucking draconian. Okay. Draconian. I think our government's going mad, but why shouldn't I mention Bitcoin? It was worse than me being a drug dealer. It was like they didn't understand it. 6 months ago, I go to another deposition, maybe 3 months ago, and the first question out of the lady's mouth was, "Are you deeply involved in the Bitcoin industry?" This is a lawyer, right? I'm like, I'm not sure what deeply means legally, but I am involved, but I don't know what it has to do with this other issue that happened 8 years ago. It's odd, man.
Yeah.
So, like, Trump's not going to have any of that. Trump is going to come in here and say, "Hey, this was my pitch to Trump in Nashville. There's 3 million jobs, sir. Do you want them in Dubai? You want them in America?"
That's
They're
right.
$250,000 careers for the next 15 years, not requiring any college education. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I just happen to be in this industry now, and I'm going to be early. And 3 years later, they're going to be like, "Man, Cardone's been here for a century." And this is the opportunity. And Trump doesn't need to understand blockchain. He's not going to. I don't need the leader. I don't need Jamie Dimon to understand every item behind blockchain or Bitcoin. It's good to hear you saying, though, for the audience, they're all here. And they just
Well,
don't
look,
want
Jamie
to-
Dimon understands. He knows. I mean, look,
Yeah.
Let's look at a simple business. Let's take a really simple, easy one for the banks. Bank of New York and Citi have multi-billion-dollar businesses creating something called American depository receipts, so that Americans can buy the largest companies overseas. They also do global depository receipts that allow Europeans, the richer Europeans, to buy American companies, et cetera, et cetera. When an American buys one of these things, they don't have the ability. You can't buy whatever, it doesn't really matter what company it is. Royal Dutch Shell.
Yeah.
You can't buy Royal Dutch Shell American depository receipt and then walk over on an English exchange through your English affiliate and sell it. You can't. They're not fungible between the two, and they never have been. That is a multi-billion-dollar business. Now, here's something that crypto does and digital finance will do when it takes over, is all stocks, all equities that are digital, you'll be able to trade them on the same platform in dollars, in euro, in yen, or versus stable coins. And so it becomes truly multi-currency and truly global. That frictional cost reduction and that increase in liquidity is great for entrepreneurs. It's great for companies, even the larger companies, but for smaller companies where instead of American depository receipts, they're paying OTC market makers potentially gray market spreads of 15%. Those go away. And oh, by the way, American entrepreneurs can now raise money overseas much more seamlessly. It's dramatically better. No one would argue that. Yet there's a lot of money being made by people who have this inefficient system. And so it's a perfect example. I mean, there are lots of them. That's probably the easiest one to understand, because you can immediately see why that would be a big deal if you were a company. Now, of course, America is going to be the last one to want to adopt that. Why? Well, because foreign entrepreneurs want to list in America to get access to our capital, not in Dubai, etc. But now imagine a world where the whole world goes digital and we're not. Now what happens? Now, first of all, none of those foreign companies are listing in America, as a primary place. And second of all, American companies are going to be like, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of money in China. There's a lot of money in
Yeah.
Europe. There's a lot of money in Latin America. I don't want to be foreclosed from that. And so ultimately, market forces will push it in this direction. But I always tell people it's going to be 15 to 20 years because you have to fight against, very, very strong profit motives. I mean, I've seen this before, just so you know.
But Dave, I see. I don't think that's the. I think that is the good news. It's going to take 15 or 20 years because if it happened all in 3 years, a small firm like CoinRoutes couldn't handle it. You would literally blow up. It's just too much deal flow. I've had to learn this through disrupting these markets. The time it takes is actually my friend because legacy is not going to move faster than me or you ever.
That's
right?
true. That's true. I'm not so
They
sure
just
about the
can't.
former. As a software company, I think we could handle it. As a broker, which we're not. Yeah, that would require infrastructure, but that's a conversation that we may
Well,
want to have.
I'm just saying, like the Node 40 business. Okay, if Ernst & Young, KPMG, and PwC called me tomorrow and said take it all, it would be really problematic. I don't care how fucking good the software is. It's millions, billions of records, right?
Yeah.
And that's now maybe your business is okay doing it because you're just dealing on that. But I mean, we're getting ready to add January the 1st due to the Treasury requirements, 12 billion 1099s. There's 4 billion 1099s. See, to me, this really sends
those are big numbers.
Well, there's 4 billion 1099s right now for legacy.
Yeah.
January the 1st, it goes to 12 billion.
Wow.
That shows you the fractured nature of digital. If I think there's 43,000 people, 43,000 firms employing 6 million people handling legacy reporting. And that goes to 12 billion. The whole accounting world is just going to be slaughtered with forms to fill out, man, and move around without any kind of like really systemic or systematic way of doing this, like in volume, transparently, without a lot of friction. It's not going to happen on a spreadsheet for sure. Which is like your stuff. If you get a day trader, dude, like this guy's trading what? You'll have a client that trades. I've got a client that trades 1 billion transactions a year, man. Like this is very different than legacy.
Yeah, we have millions, certainly hundreds of thousands a day. But yeah, look, technology can scale a lot faster than humans. That's the thing. The part that you mentioned that's interesting is the number of people. And the reason why it's a big deal is that they're like Dubai, you mentioned, they want to be the financial markets of the future.
Totally.
London got gifted by the U.S. bad regulatory decisions being one of the largest financial centers on the planet because the U.S. abandoned the euro-dollar market to London. And London is hoping a similar mistake happens with regard to crypto, and we'll see if that's true, and et cetera. But the fact is, it's not about crypto per se; it's about the digitization of finance, and I will always come back.
Man.
I will always come back to that. I mean, my company is profitable trading crypto, but I can't even imagine what we're worth in a world where the world goes fully digital. Now, I probably can imagine it, but it takes a lot of imagination.
Yeah, no, I think you're in a good spot. I think anyone building a business here that's, you're doing beyond Bitcoin, right? Yeah. So I think
you trade anything that trades on a digital asset exchange, and frankly, it's a pretty deep list. It's over 3,000 instruments and all the derivatives around those instruments. That's the other thing that is another whole show we could talk about is how the advancement in derivative markets outside the United States could actually benefit U.S. derivative markets in terms of decreasing systemic risk. But unfortunately, the torchbearer for that was a dude named Sam Bankman-Fried, and so in terms of that, it set back the chance for that to happen for years, and for good reason. I mean, he was definitely an unsavory character and was trying to do some things that were bad. But the actual structure and innovations that we've seen in derivatives overseas in the digital markets will eventually end up in the U.S. because they're more efficient and by the way, less risky and less systemic risk.
Yeah, we'll find our way here. I don't think we will find our way here because guys like you and me are aren't going away. There's nothing else I can do. I can't go do heavy equipment. And there's just too many people, and there's too many people here, man. I mean, half the people that are here, they're smarter than you and I, better looking than you and I, and better capitalized with a remit that's just like, we don't even know who these people are. You and I are loudmouths in this space, but when Citibank's throwing, 50 people at it, Deloitte's got 2,000, everyone's going to have a digital expertise division. Do you agree with that? Every firm on this planet is going to have a digital division.
Harry, I lived it. I was at Solomon Smith Barney at the time, at the same in 1999, and I'll never forget this because I was in program trading and doing transition trading and other sort of stuff, and was angling and building trading algorithms. And they said, we need an internet strategy. And so they formed the Internet Operating Committee. I'll never forget this. It was the most ridiculous thing, because that was the time when if you had a website, you were worth, whatever.
You had an IOC, man.
So the Internet Operating Committee was formed. They put me on it. And then they decided we needed to completely change our technology. So I became the global architect. We built a system called GATE for Global Automated Trading Engine, for Solomon Smith Barney to actually modernize all of our trading operations in the equity division. Now, anyone who's ever been on a trading floor knows that you want a P&L, that you don't want to be some guy building infrastructure, because you'll never be taken seriously. Yeah, they made me managing director, cool, but still, my exit strategy was to run stat arb and run inside of it. And so we created the first centralized risk book and all this stuff then. But we lived it. It was all in response to technology. As technology changes, Wall Street adapts, and they will always do so in a way. I mean, you could talk to people at Franklin Templeton, and they'll tell you, because they're not shy about it. They created this a coin called the Benji, which they will not call a stable coin because they don't want to get it, because the regulators don't want them to. But effectively, it's a digitized money market, and they will tell you it's dramatically more efficient for them to administer. And so, you're talking Franklin Templeton here. I mean, we've all seen Larry Fink from BlackRock. Fidelity is well known as being in this space for a long time. And these are not people who are afraid of this. This is definitely something and a technology that has huge advantages. So you look at JP Morgan. I mean, Jamie Dimon's going to talk his own book. He has a lot of businesses that will be disrupted. But what's the most important thing when you're going to be disrupted is don't fall into the innovator's dilemma. Yeah. Right. And the innovator's dilemma basically says, let other people do the disruption. I'll hold out as long as you can. Well, what does JP Morgan do? Well, they're kind of saying, okay, I'm going to hold out as long as I can, but I'm going to invest as a hedge in the disruptive technologies because eventually I want to have a part of it. And that's what they're doing. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, these are not dumb people. They're really quite smart.
Yeah, the Franklin Templeton people, I have been probably more impressed with them than anyone. In particular, the head lady. They've been very stealthy. They know what they're talking about, and they've been doing it for what now, 12 years? She's going to go all in on this trade, man. This is, you only need one. Talk about game theory. Game theory works no better place than Wall Street.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, I try not to, I really don't want to mention a lot of names, but yes, I was very impressed by them too. And there are a lot, I think there are a lot more impressive people doing a lot more interesting things than most people in the crypto industry are aware of, and most people in the financial industry. I will say this. I mean, I'm actually on the board of Security Traders Association of New York. And I know that organization is very forward thinking, and their reason for existence is to help traders. And traders all want to trade things that are volatile and new because they can make things better. When I first moved into crypto and digital assets, people thought I was crazy. And then when
was that, Dave? What
17.
Year? 17.
Right. So, a while ago.
Yeah.
And then, when crypto winter set in after the Bitcoin price, it was just relentlessly started driving downwards. People kind of felt sorry. And then, after the pandemic, people were like, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been, how do I get involved in this? And that's the difference. And I've had a front row seat for it at various trade organizations and whatnot, but we're still early. And early is defined in a variety of ways. And you know, I have a very sanguine approach to this. My hope is, what I would like to personally do is help firms navigate this landscape, understand what the technology is, they can do, where they could be disrupted, what they need to do, and what pitfalls not to fall into, because the market's very different and it's a different market structure. And that market structure is coming to a theater near you because it is more efficient. And we've learned it. I mean, if you had a data-driven SEC, which we used to have, and by the way, this is once again nonpartisan. Mary Shapiro, who was an Obama appointee, was an independent, and her mantra was data-driven. And almost everything the SEC did in those days was based off of data. If they started to see the trading data out of the digital exchanges and how these products are trading, they would quickly understand that a lot of the prescriptive rules that they have in the equity world are not just unnecessary, but are causing extra expense and probably shouldn't be there. But that's data, and that will happen. And that will start making it easier for digital markets to converge, because the rules are just very different right now, because the equity rules were written. Basically, there's good reasons why they got written in a variety of ways. I mean, Paul Atkins will give me that "I told you so," because when he wrote his dissent against Reg NMS back in the early 2000s, in 2005, I think it was, or 4, he said we shouldn't pass this rule. It's too prescriptive. We shouldn't, hamstring markets. And every word he said was right. And what I said to Paul at a dinner is, I said, I agree with every word of your dissent, except I disagree with you. We needed it, because if you didn't do that, the New York Stock Exchange would still be a monopoly. And and we should have been able to do that in a different way. Now, we don't have any of those issues right now. So we will end up in a world where regulations will converge. Yeah, the securities regulations today were written either in the 70s or the 40s for the most part, with a few little things around the edges. There's this thing called the internet that didn't exist when they decided what a prospectus was. Yet people still have to do paper prospectuses that nobody reads, that don't get updated with 30-day periods of time, when things that happen that used to take 30 days now take 30 minutes, and the rules haven't been changed, right? And what they disclose hasn't changed. So, the idea, the thought that our rules are good enough and we don't want to change them is nuts. But it's going to take a actual data-driven SEC, a data-driven CFTC, a data-driven, name that 3-letter agency, in order to get to modernize, because we have a lot of very, very old rules out there.
Yeah, this reminds me of Reagan administration when he came out and said, we're going to deregulate all these utilities. They've made enough money. Let's open up the pipes. Let's give free access. This has to happen to Google. It has to happen to Meta. It has to happen. These are utilities now, man. And in my opinion,
profit. But remember, that's the biggest difference. I mean, those utilities are for profit too, but all the stock exchanges are still self-regulatory organizations. Should they be?
Yeah, but where I'm headed, though, is people are going to create competitive structures. Like Larry's talking about going to Dallas. Hey, Wall Street, you want to fight us? No problem. I actually think this only gets built anew. I was with Solana, the CEO of Solana, at the JP Morgan thing. Dude, that JP Morgan, not the JP Morgan, the Wyoming symposium.
The blockchain symposium out there.
It made Nashville. It made Nashville look like a piece of shit, dude.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I have never seen so many studs talking, hey, what's going to be out there in 6 years? It's totally changed. Not one thing on Bitcoin prices. Like, now we're thinking 4 years, 8 years, and 12 years out. Oh my God, I've never heard that, dude. Never heard that.
It's really important. Look, I've been saying it for a while. I'll never forget having breakfast with my friend Larry Tabb, who's now research director at Bloomberg, but he used to run a very long-standing consultant in the industry and well-known. And in 2018, I told him that all financial markets would go digital, and he thought I was nuts. And then I started explaining why, and he said, "Oh, you're not nuts, but it's going to take a long time." And I said, "Oh yeah, it will take a long time."
Hey, that's good.
That's the thing.
That's really good. There's no rush here. There's no rush here. I've been doing this my whole life, man. Every time I was in a rush to get my position in, and the truth is, there's always room to expand in these markets. This is going to be a really, really large market that no one fully understands. And I mean, this was the point that Raj really impressed upon me. He's like, hey, and he's the CEO of Solana. He's like, it will not survive unless it was built for purpose.
That's right.
And Scaramucci
Exactly.
turned around and looked at me, and I'm like, dude, I've been telling you this for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's why I killed our sales team at Node 40. I'm like, we don't need to sell anything. We need to build the right solution. No one has built the right solution yet.
There are solutions being built, and there are solutions that operate in different ways. And we could have a long conversation about distributed finance and decentralized finance, most people call it decentralized finance. A lot of what exists today is so it's essentially there to facilitate things that we really don't care about. Things like tax avoidance, right? I would never avoid paying taxes. I mean, if I traded crypto, I didn't trade last year, but this year I did, so I will report everything, because don't screw with the IRS, right? But there are people who do that. If you want to, do something that your government says you can't do, so you're an American citizen, you can't buy tokens. Now, think about if you had said 5 years ago that that U.S. citizens are going to be excluded from this brand new financial market and all these new assets, you'd have thought that was crazy. In fact, it is crazy. Yet that is what, unfortunately, this particular administration has essentially done. They said, okay, Americans have to be excluded. And that's crazy. But that's a reason for DeFi, right? What will be the reason for DeFi and new plumbing will emerge, because the current market models in DeFi are a bit primitive and not necessarily what would be perfect by any stretch. But what will emerge is an open financial system that breaks oligopolies. And there are people who are building on that. There's no doubt about that. Now, I know of multiple, and there are others that I think make a whole lot of sense. So, when I hear this sort of stuff, I immediately, my ears perk up. It's like, okay, well, what are you building? That's cool. And I have had probably 24 conversations with founders who bounce ideas off me. I love doing that. And a lot of them make sense. And a lot of them will only be allowed when the regulators allow it, which is kind of crazy. We've kind of gone backwards, if you think. Used to be the opposite. Used to be forgiveness was easier than permission. Now it's
Oh, absolutely. It's very opposite now. Very opposite. You get penalized even for trying anything.
Yep.
I mean, you'll get penalized. But this is really interesting what we were talking about, just people trying to catch up. I had an argument, I think, a year and a half ago with a regulator, and they were wanting us to agree on what microtransactions were. And I'm like, dude, your idea of what a microtransaction is, you're making definitions up now. Like, you're literally just deciding what it is, but the whole planet in the future, I would say in 3 to 5 years, is going to be a microtransaction.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. Everybody in America under a certain age would use cash for a lot of things, right? You're
Would use what?
Cash, like
cash.
Cash.
Yes, correct.
Even today, people still use cash, and you can go into a store and buy stuff with cash, whatever. Try doing that in Europe. Can't. Now, with crypto, you have the ability to replicate a lot of the benefits of cash without paying credit card processing fees of 2% or whatever it is, 3% or whatever it is. But until the regulations come along, you really can't. Now, will you be able to? Of course. I mean, it is so much cheaper to trade a stable coin from you to me than it is to me if you to accept a credit card payment from me. That's a major drag on the economy that people just assume. Now, if you're
$7 trillion a year in the United States alone,
it's a huge, huge drag. And people don't understand that literally just by flipping a switch and saying, okay, this is legal now, innovators will swarm in. And if it's, I don't know the number, I haven't looked at it, but whatever it is, trillions of costs go back into the pockets of consumers and businesses.
Which then gets spent back in the economy.
That's right. And so when I hear these arguments about crypto politically, and they start talking about, money laundering, it's like, listen, first of all, it's easier to police money laundering with crypto than it is the
Yep.
other. So that's a terrible argument. But you're not
Fact.
understanding the actual impact, positive impact on decreasing frictional costs is potentially massive. And the negative impact of letting the rest of the world do it before we do is even worse. Why is it only 70 some odd Democrats voted for Fit 21? Now, Fit 21 isn't a great bill. I mean, there are issues with it, but it does introduce a safe haven for innovation. And that, if it did nothing else, would be worth it. This should be bipartisan, except for something that Bobby Kennedy said, RFK Jr. said in his speech last week, which I hate to be political overtly, but it really struck a chord with me. He said something that I didn't know. And it turns out I researched, it's a Brookings Institution study. He said that the Democrats, people who voted for the Democrats, controlled 70% of the wealth of the country.
Really?
Which is, yeah, really. And that's fascinating to me. It's actually off of counties where it's lean Democrats. So it's a little bit, I don't know in terms of actual people, but it's a big deal. But think about that. If you control the wealth, you're less likely to vote for an inclusive system, because what you currently have, like if you're, let's pick on my favorite person to pick on. So pick on the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, who has been validly here.
One of my least favorite people.
He is essentially a technological aristocrat, and he wants to keep the aristocracy by making new aristocrats have a harder time to become, on his level. And I'm happy to say he's happy to debate me on it. He probably wouldn't want to. Most people don't want to debate me because I was a college debater and I was pretty good at it. Probably better at that than anything else I've ever done. So, but the simple fact is if you want policies that will make it harder for people to get wealthy, by all means, continue to endorse the anti-crypto army. We could talk about the capital gains tax, but the idea of taxing unrealized gains is another one of those ones. It's like it would literally destroy innovation in America. Okay, great. Meanwhile, Bill Ackman, who used to be a Democrat, I don't know what he's voting this year, but he has an idea that basically to do the same idea, what you want, which is instead of taxing the gains, which is insane, tax what people spend, i.e. if you borrow against your company stock, tax the gain on what you borrowed. And that's okay. Because now all of a sudden it's not going to stop people who are investing in building. And it will only make you pay when you're actually getting paid the money. It's always been silly that you could get paid a salary and pay 50%, but take a loan against your stock and pay 0. Right. And he's saying fix that. But you don't hear those sorts of things from the mainstream, from mainstream politicos for a variety of reasons. But I think it's a brilliant idea. In other words, there's ways of achieving.
It doesn't solve the problem. Okay. The problem is we have a government that has no fiscal responsibility whatsoever. So all you're doing is fucking not fit. We need to stop spending.
Well, that's true.
It doesn't make any sense.
You and I agree on that. But assuming all other things being equal, all you want to do is have Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos pay a tax rate that's higher than their secretary, then tax them when they borrow against their shares, because that's where their money's coming from. That's all I'm saying. I am not, I don't want to go, as I said, don't want to go down the rabbit hole of money printer go burr. But if you're going to ask me, why am I so bullish on Bitcoin? I'm bullish on Bitcoin for a very specific reason, is that sound money is the only, the fiat experiment will ultimately end, and we will end up with sound money, and Bitcoin is the leading candidate to be that. Along the way,
do you think that construct fails in your lifetime?
The fiat money?
Yeah.
No, I think that
I think
Rome did not fall on a date, right? The Roman Empire didn't fall on a date. And the fiat Empire,
it was even more painful than that. It would have been better if that would happen, but it's not like that. This is the death of 1,000,000 trillion cuts forever.
That's right. And it only started in 1971. I mean, I am older than the fiat economy. It's crazy for me. I'm not that old. At least I don't feel that old. But I am older than fiat, which started when Nixon pulled out of the gold window.
Right.
Look, Bitcoin is still in its infancy. It still trades like an option on its own adoption, right?
I think it is an option. I think it's the best option in the world. It's a call and a put, and it has no time decay.
That's right.
I don't know
it is
why
an option
other people
with no
can't see
data.
it. Like,
Exactly. It's an option
it's
without
unbelievable,
data.
dude.
That's right.
It's
that's exactly
and no premium. And Dave, no premium.
No, negative, massively negative premium. Yes, very, very small premium.
I agree on that.
And so
we
that
could have,
to me is why I'm a Bitcoiner on financial markets. I also believe there will be many winners in the crypto ecosystem for solving many of these other problems we just talked about. But Bitcoin as money is basically perfect with everything of all the things you need for money to be globally accepted. It needs to get more mass acceptance. That's all it needs, because it's the only one that's totally verifiable. It's the only one that
well,
can't
dude,
be.
we're getting acceptance now.
Oh, of course we are.
It is
Which is why I
showing
think
up.
that this price action is a gift to people who wish to accumulate. So,
Well, that's where I wanted to go with you on your tool on CoinRoutes, excuse me. Do you guys pronounce the word routes or roots?
depends whether we're in England or the United States. Roots or route.
Exactly.
Well, it's like tournament or tournament.
Yes. It's not as bad as aluminium and aluminum.
That's true.
So could this case of the price moving around in the last, say, 8 weeks, what I've noticed is that the moves up are much smoother than the moves down. And my thesis is that there's enough people using a program like yours where the purchases, I suspect there's more buyers on your program than sellers, but maybe it could be equal. But I think the purchasing is more sophisticated than the selling. Is
Here's
there
what I
any
think.
validity in that?
I'm gonna answer that question. It's not about buyers or sellers. It's about speculators versus accumulators. Today, we are in a period of time when the accumulators are accumulating, and people like Michael Saylor and others use technology such as ours, provided by Coinbase, provided by Talos, etc., to do their accumulation. Because if they don't, they're wasting money, and they're patient.
Well, and they're going to be seen in the market, right?
Right. And so other people are out there and speculating, and the speculators, the smart ones, use this technology. And a lot of others don't bother because their spreads are so good they don't care about. And the speculators are trading lots of instruments. So right now in Bitcoin, this is, I don't know if you want me to do this, but I'll just do this really quick. So this is one view. We have multiple dashboards in our system. I don't know. Can you see it?
Yeah. Let me see if I can get you on stage with that. Okay. Yeah, beautiful.
So you can see the screen. So if you look at, this is just a dashboard. You could put whatever. You could trade Bitcoin in dollars. That's up here, right? Right. You can trade Bitcoin in Tether. That's up there. So if I trade into dollars, you can see the chart in dollars. I can look at the inverse perpetual swap in Bitcoin dollars. I can look at the future that trades on the CME. I could look at the perpetual swap Bitcoin to Tether. These are all trading Bitcoin direct Bitcoin, but in various Delta One forms. All of these are trading, and they all have different prices. And so the speculators tend to trade in the perpetual swaps abroad. This is where you'll notice this is OKX and Binance and Bybit and other exchanges like that. The speculation tends to start in the perpetual swap markets. The accumulation tends to start in the spot markets. And I think that's more of what we've observed, whatever. And then, it's like buying and stuff is obviously in our system is really easy. You just say, I want to buy, whatever. This is a simulator. So I want to buy 1,000 Bitcoin and it will start placing orders. I'm not going to bother doing it because it'll bore people. But the simple fact is that there's all sorts of market dynamics because there's so many products that trade it, and it's 24/7 and global.
Do you think, and I'll let you go because your time is valuable, and I wish we'd had done this prior because you're just a lot of information. Do you think that? Let maybe we get to actually the thing that people want to talk about, which is, hey, what's going to happen in this cycle and after the election to Bitcoin?
Well, there's two choices.
Scenario.
Well, look, if there's a Trump presidency, I think Bitcoin will go. My prediction is Bitcoin will see a slightly larger cycle than is anticipated, and will top out somewhere in the mid 200s. That's what I think. I don't know what will happen.
Does legacy market do well too? S&P, Dow, NASDAQ?
Depends. I think that companies that are outsourcing and subject to tariffs in significant ways, if he goes ahead with that, will have issues. I think other companies that are more domestic will do well. I think it's an interesting market. It also questions who wins the House and the Senate, whether he can actually get things done, etc. But pure deregulation, his support of Bitcoin is pretty interesting. I mean, people don't underestimate the fact that if you could say a lot of things about Trump, but one thing that we know he thinks he's good at is trading. He thinks he makes good deals. What's the best deal? The best deal he can make in Bitcoin is amass Bitcoin for the government before other people actually know you're doing it, and then they all pile in after. Because the best place to be in any big trade is the first one to put it on. And so I do think that there's a pretty good opportunity for the U.S. to make a little money for the Treasury by being smart. And Senator Lummis's bill, which I'm sure you talked about in Jackson Hole, is nowhere near as crazy as people think, and actually, given our position, could be a good idea. It's not required for my Bitcoin price analysis. My Bitcoin price analysis is basically looking at the level of exuberance we've gotten to relative to the growth of the network in every prior cycle, and that's where it would be. Okay, now let's say Harris wins, so we have a Kamala, Walz presidency, and the question then is an unknown to me. Will Elizabeth Warren continue to wield enormous power inside the administration, in which case we're stuck where we are? Or will they do something which I think is actually a smart tactical move? They're not talking about it, but I think it's what they will do. I think the tactical move will be to take the heat off of Bitcoin, accept it because it's in with BlackRock, Fidelity, etc., and push the heat on the rest of crypto, which is not good for entrepreneurs, is not good for a lot of things, but could also be good for the price of Bitcoin. And so I would expect to see some changes in either case post-election, but obviously I'm more bullish from a Bitcoin perspective, and the market is obviously true. You could almost directly correlate being at the top of the trading range when Polymarket had Trump at 70% versus now we are toward the bottom of the trading range with it being a 50-50, coin flip. And so the markets obviously agree with that assessment, but that's sort of my thought. But the one thing we know, Gary, is we're in August, right? People really start thinking about this stuff in September, October. And so let's see what happens is really.
Yeah, we have 90 days before the election. There's a lot that can happen. I mean, we're 4 weeks away from an assassination attempt, 48 hours away from guy at Telegram being put in prison. When you say, hey, America will just be slow, it's like, I wouldn't go launch a business in Europe right now.
Certainly not a business that allows encrypted technology for people to communicate. You can't do it. They have lost the plot on freedom of speech. They really have.
buddy, I think I could go over there and start a lumber business and they would put me in jail. I mean, they just don't like my views now. See, this is becoming really problematic.
That scares me. I hope that's not true. I really do. But
buddy, I see it right in my face. I mean, I'm getting letters written about me on one subject and including my donations to Trump and my involvement in Bitcoin. I'm like, God, well, what does this have to do with anything? Like it's unrelated.
It should be.
I mean, imagine if you got stopped by the police for doing 70 and a 55 and they said, hey, are you having the Bitcoin? I mean, right? The ATF shows up at your door and says, I want to check all your gun permits. And then, by the way, are you big in Bitcoin? I mean, it's just, it's concerning. Listen, thank you very much.
It isn't that bad, but I'm not nearly as public as you, so I don't know.
Well,
I haven't had that experience.
It's happening to my brother too. So the cool thing about being a twin, when you get it in double dose on something that's not even related, we're different social securities. You're like, maybe there's a little picking and choosing going on here for loudmouths. I actually think decentralization is doing better in media than it is in crypto. Like we're making more progress destroying CNN. CNN took a $10 billion write-off. Did you see that?
It is good news.
The
funny thing is that people, I get this all the time. The one thing I will say is, if you tell me what was the single most important selfless action taken by a human being over the last couple of years, I would say it's Elon buying Twitter. And,
Oh,
and
it's
I don't
very
know.
important.
This may maybe sound like I'm too much of a fanboy, and he obviously whether it will be a money loser in the end, I actually doubt it. I think he will make it work, but certainly on paper, he lost a lot of money, and that to me saved free speech in many ways. And should it have been necessary? Of course not. Was it necessary? You can make a very strong argument. The answer is yes.
Oh, I totally agree. If he said, "Hey, it's $44 billion and we're selling shares today," he repriced it down to 20. I think I would invest in it, dude. And the reason I would invest in it, I think it's a safety. It's an insurance policy. I pay premiums all the time for insurance policies. Okay, for somebody to send some money to Elon, as soon as he did that, I actually bought a subscription. I don't want free.
Yeah,
Somebody's got to support these businesses.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Dave, thank you very much. People reach out to you if you're a big trader and you want to manage your expense better. CoinRoutes is the way to go. Dave's wealth of knowledge. You can reach him at Dave Weisberger 1 on Twitter. Anything else, Dave, you would like to share?
Yeah, if anyone is interested, we're establishing a wait list for people who are individual traders that are active traders at CoinRoutes.com. You can see it. You go on the website and find it out. So that's definitely useful. And yeah, I'd like to continue the conversations, Gary. I know you guys do spaces all the time. Every once in a while, I'd be happy to jump on.
Yeah. Well, anytime that you're interested in any of the subjects, I'm trying to help people. That's my whole goal here, is to educate. And I think the more educators, the better. And there'll be some ding dongs out there, but I think, if we can the more education, the better. And I love the more mature guys showing up with the younger guys. It's going to add a really cool mix of understanding in a market that's really getting more and more complicated by the day. So really appreciate your contributions to the entire community, Dave. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and have a great day. Take care.
Well, that was good, guys. I really like Dave. Dave, I'm going to just go ahead and remove you from the room and then close up. Guys, we're going to end this session here. Dave is has become a non-physical friend to date, but I suspect he and I will have many stories to tell over the time in this industry. I have no plans on going anywhere. I know he doesn't. I probably got another 5 or 10 years left in me. The amount of relationships. Now, I've done this before where I've seen these big changes. I come into an industry that didn't know anyone. The amount of relationships that are going to be built here, like I'm going to have phone numbers and addresses from people 5-10 years from now that I'd never met before. This is so cool that somebody can come into an industry unknown, make contributions to that industry. I've been doing this now 3 years. This is not a massive amount of work for the amount of progress somebody can make new. You got to pay, your respects to the industry, and you pay attention to who's who and stay away from the bad guys. But for me, this is an awesome opportunity to meet people like Dave, have him come on this show. You guys meet him. You start to understand the difference in quality people, their ability to communicate, their understanding of other markets, and the analogies they draw between those markets. See, this is really where watching some of these older guys come in, they're using everything they learned from the prior 30, 40 years, and they're putting that in place. They wish they would have known what they know today back then. And now they're seeing this opportunity going, oh, wow, I'm going to build this business because I know it's going to be needed in the future. So it's like for he and I like my Node 40 business, his CoinRoutes business, we both look at it probably like, wow, this is awesome, man. And then, of course, the opportunity to buy Bitcoin and maybe some of the other protocols that may or may not be successful. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end session here. I've got a massively loaded up day today. It's Wednesday and it feels like Friday. You guys have an awesome day. And I know if somebody wants to reach out to James, I'm happy to have James on the show. He's a smart guy. What are we going to do today? We're going to buy some Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin right now? It's at $15,000. 58,866. I thought it was going to play with 60,000. I still think it closes above 60,000 today for the day candle, but we'll see. Buy some Bitcoin, buy $50, $500, $5,000, or $5 million. I don't really care, but I'd be buying at 58. That's not advice. It's what I am doing. And the second thing that we're going to do today is we're going to go do something nice for somebody. Let's pick somebody that we wouldn't normally help. Okay. I'm going to add a little curveball in here. You're going to have to do this for someone that you're angry at, you don't like, you think their breath stinks. They did something to you 32 years ago and you failed to let go of it. Do something nice for those people. Okay. Send them some flowers anonymously. Okay. Do something good for someone else. And you cannot brag about it or tell anyone about it. You can share it with the universe or whoever made you, but other than that, no human beings get to know about the great thing that you did today, small or large. Guys, I'm here. I'm enjoying my life. I'm enjoying my opportunity in Bitcoin. I really am. I would be so nervous if I did not have some Bitcoin. Thank God I have a lot, but I most certainly do not have enough. Relative to the impact that I'd like to make on this planet. So I'm going to ask you guys to do something wonderful, sweet, nice for somebody today, and let's make this world a better place. All right, that's the end of me. Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. See you guys probably Thursday at a space, and I'll most certainly see you on a live tomorrow. Ciao.